Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. May June exams are coming close, so right now you have to put your full focus on practicing past papers. That is what we'll do in today's lesson. For AS students, we'll solve paper 1 October November 2024. In this video, my objective, as always, is to teach you how to write the answers, not to give you ready answers for the questions. No doubt I will be writing model answers, but please take it in the right spirit and understand that you need to do active practice. So what you can do is, in this video, you can keep it on, keep the paper in front of you, the October November paper, write your answer, then look at the video, see whether your answers are meeting the requirements which I'm discussing or not. So keep on writing answers, pausing the video, resuming it, do some active practice to make sure you're also able to write the answers in a way that can get you full marks. Many students have a misconception that if they do 2 years past papers or 5 years past papers, they can expect to see repeated questions on their paper. That does not happen as far as psychology is concerned. There are 12 course studies and there are so many descriptive and evaluative features that they can ask you about. So no doubt questions can be similar. This year they could ask you about the sample of one study, next year they would ask you about another study, but they need not repeat questions because so many combinations are possible. That is why when you're practicing, just learn how to write. Don't try to memorize the answers. I will be explaining to you how to write in this video, which is why it will take me some time. And so I will divide this lesson into, I think, 2 parts at least. I'll have to divide it. I won't be able to complete the entire paper in this one video. Let's do as much as we can today. So I'm coming to the first question. In the study by Hassett et al., a sample of monkeys from a troop of 135 was used. State the total number of monkeys in the final sample. Okay, I don't intend to explain the studies to you in this video. It's beyond the scope of practice, but as much as is relevant so that you don't make mistakes in answering the question, I will discuss that much. In the Hassett et al. Study, in the Yerkes Institute, there were 135 monkeys, which they have pointed out here. Now, many monkeys were excluded in 3 stages. In the first stage, infant monkeys were excluded because their sex could not be identified. In the second stage, those monkeys were excluded whose hormones had been manipulated in past studies. And in the third stage, those monkeys were excluded who did not interact with the toys for at least 5 times across 7 trials. After all these exclusions, how many monkeys were left? That is what they are asking you when they are asking you about the final sample. So that is the number which they are looking for. I know in Hassett you must have come across so many numbers because at every stage they have described the number of monkeys. Make sure your focus is on the correct place. The very final, those monkeys who interacted with the toys for at least a minimum of 5 times. What is happening is sometimes students, they come to me in the last minute just to practice past papers and they have learned from different textbooks. Now I don't know exactly which textbook it is, but for this study in particular, many students are confused with the number 82. They believe 82 is the final sample of the monkey. I believe 82 are those who were exposed to the toys, but many of them did not interact with the toys for at least 5 occasions. So number of them had to be excluded, not included in data analysis. They want the very final figure, not the 82 figure. After, from that 82 also they had excluded monkeys, then how many were left? They are asking you for that. The command term is state. When the command term is state, you can directly give off the answer. That is one number, one word which is required. You can write that. You need not even write a complete sentence, let alone trying to explain or elaborate why this is the final sample. So just be very to the point for these type of questions. Okay, so here the final sample number is 34 for Hassett et al. No doubt you can also put it as, some students will put it as like 23 females and 11 males. But I would suggest, though they won't mark it as incorrect, just make a habit out of directly addressing what is given in the question. If they wanted to know how many males and females are there, they would have asked you very directly. Specify number of males and females in the sample. If that is not how they are putting it, they don't want to know the breakup. Just for good practice, as far as possible, address only what is required in the question. Don't waste your time because unnecessary things are not credited in the paper. Many of you will be taking psychology in A2 after completing AS, so it's going to be proved to be a very good habit if you become very focused on the questions and writing to the point answers, especially next year, it's going to help you a lot. You have to be fast in answering questions in psychology. Okay, next question is identify two toys that were categorized as wheeled in the study. Again, when the command term is identify, you strictly have to name. Uh, as many words as is required, you just need to write that much. You don't need to write more than that. Here, one tendency I've noticed in these type of questions is students don't learn fine details. They feel it won't be required or who will memorize so much. Then when this type of a question comes, they don't know the answer. They start guessing. Lots of students will guess, okay, what could be wheel toys? It could be this, and they'll write down. Avoid doing that. Make sure you study sincerely and you memorize these type of details. Don't try to assume or estimate what must be the answer. Make sure you're writing from what you've learned in the study. There are several toys. As far as I remember, there are 5 to 6 wheel toys at least, which are mentioned in Hassett et al. Which is coming to my mind, one is wagon. So I'll put wagon as the first one. Some other one might be coming to your mind. You can take that one. And one more which is coming to my mind is car. So I'm just going to answer in one word. So just make sure whatever you're writing is from the list of 5 or 6 wheel toys that were there and that you're not writing anything beyond that list. Okay, let's look at the next question. Outline one conclusion from the study. In conclusion, the biggest issue is most students will write about findings of the study. There's too much confusion in students' mind between findings and conclusions. Findings or results are always the numerical data or the data in words which has been obtained from the study, and it's very specific to the study. Conclusion is the larger theoretical generalization that can be made from the findings. If that is complicated, you can think about what are you understanding from the findings, that's the conclusion. Or another way of thinking about it is what was the aim of the study? Was the aim satisfied or not? That is what you need to state in the conclusion. Okay, so it's going to meet some larger purpose for why the study was conducted. Ideally, you have only 12 studies and you know conclusions can be asked from the studies. In every textbook, conclusions are given very neatly in a separate section. So you should have learned all the conclusions by the time the paper comes. As far as Hassett et al. Is concerned, if you write the conclusion as supposing 79% of the male monkeys played with wheel toys, that is a finding. That's very specific to the study and it's a numerical result. That does not count as conclusion. The researchers wanted to prove that differential toy preferences across the sexes are because of different hormones, dominant hormones in the body. That is what they were able to establish, at least to the extent of male monkeys. So the conclusion is, at least in male monkeys, toy preferences are because of their hormones. In whichever way you've learned it from, whichever source you have learned, make sure you're writing something to this effect. For an outline type of question, or alternatively, if it was described, make sure that you're writing a complete sentence. Don't answer in bullet points or in 1, 2 words. That is okay for name, identify, state type of command terms, not for outline. So how I would put the conclusion is, sex differences in toy preferences across male and female monkeys are because of different hormones in their body Right, I'll just put it simply that way. I know how you would have learned it, the wording could be different. Only thing you need to take care about is that you do mention differential sex toy preferences and hormones. These things are important to mention. Rest your wording could be different from this. As I specified, at least for males, they've been able to find this, not for females. So if you want to be very specific, you can say at least to the extent of males. Right now, I've not gone into that detail because it's fine. We don't need to be that specific. Next is from the study by Saavedra and Silverman, outline the change in ratings of distress when the boy had to imagine hugging his mother with her shirt full of buttons. Whenever we do Saavedra and Silverman, I make sure to emphasize that students learn the ratings very properly, the numerical ratings, because that's asked a lot in the papers. This time they've asked for hugging the mother. Sometimes they could ask for the imagination of hundreds of buttons falling on the boy. You cannot score on this question unless you're able to give the exact number. So some students will say before the imagination began, the ratings were high. During imagination, midway they fell down, and at the end they were the least. That's correct, but they don't want just the pattern. They're asking you for change in ratings. They have directly mentioned they want something about the ratings, which means that they are expecting you to give the number. Okay, so make sure to focus on the wording. Anything they mention like ratings, percentage, mean, some statistic has been specified. In that case, you will have to give it. Okay, if we consider the boy was in the imaginal therapy, the second therapy in Saavedra, and he was imagining hugging his mother. That time at the beginning, before he could start imagining, he had given a rating of 7. Then midway through the session, when they asked him, after he had practiced cognitive restructuring a bit, he gave a rating of 4. And at the end of the session, when he had finally completed visualization and restructuring, he gave a rating of 2. So writing these numbers 7, 4 and 2 in the correct context, correct order is what is going to get you marks. So I'll just give you a sample. Before the session, the boy gave a rating of 7. If you want, you can mention feelings thermometer and all, though it's not very necessary for the situation. He reduced it to 4 midway through the session and to 2, sorry, not 2, 3, to 3 at the end of the session. I'll just highlight the numbers so that you can focus on what is getting you marks for this. Okay, so I've put the numbers in bold so that you know that is how you're going to get marks. Let's look at the next question. Explain one weakness of the study. Also, one more thing I just forgot for the previous question. If you just write the ratings were 7, then 4, then 2, so you've just learned the numbers in your writing, you won't get full marks. There has to be an indication that 7 was before, 4 was midway, and 3 was at the end. Means you have to specify the time points also, at what time point which rating is given to get full marks. Okay, next is give one weakness of this study. When questions like these are asked for 2 marks. Firstly, the command term is explained because most students will give a very generic answer. They just name the weakness. For example, I think most students are going to write about generalizability because it's a case study. So they just say the study lacks generalizability and they leave it. You get only 1 mark for just naming the weakness. When they are saying explain, it means name it and then with reference to the context of the study, explain, give reasoning. Why is this a problem? So 1 mark is for naming, 1 is for explaining why is it a problem. So what students will do, they'll name it generalizability. Then if we ask them to elaborate, they'll say, because case study data is not generalizable. That's not an explanation because you're not referring specifically to Saavedra and Silverman. Or they will say that only one child is there, so it is not generalizable. Again, that is something you could say for any case study that has been done on a child. Are you being specific to Saavedra and Silverman? No. So you need to mention what is it that is unique about the boy, what makes his case possibly different from others, which is why the findings would not generalize. So when you're explaining, it has to be with reference to the particular study that has been asked about. When it comes to two markers where they ask for evaluation, strength or weakness, we don't write in Peel format as such, that is for 10 marks. Here we just need to think of two sentences, naming a correct weakness and second explaining the context of the weakness. Now many students ask one more question. Do I need to define in general what is generalizability if I'm writing it as a weakness? No, if they want you to define what generalizability is, the question will be phrased that way. Explain what is generalizability. Explain why it was a weakness in the Saavedra and Silverman study. So don't worry anytime about giving definitions of general features. Mostly they don't want that. If they want that, they always specify. Okay, let's see one sample answer for this. Okay, so I could just say one weakness is the lack of generalizability in the study, since only one boy with a very unique phobia of buttons was investigated. The findings may not generalize to the population of individuals having other phobias. Again, I'll just highlight, I'll put in bold what is getting you the marks. You have to write complete sentences for explain type of command terms also, but you just have to make sure that the key points are then your answer. Key points meaning which I've put in bold. So lack of generalizability is naming the weakness, which I had mentioned before. Why it is a problem? Contextualized to the study, because this boy has a very unique type of phobia, which is of buttons. Generally, people don't have phobias of buttons. So that will get me a second mark, contextualizing and explaining in terms of the study. I will upload the answers which I'm writing here on my website, and I'll link it in the description box and pinned comment below. So you can download this as a free PDF and you can keep it as a reference for you in the future. On the next page, we have the next set of questions. First is from the study by Pozzulo et al. Outline one aim of the study. Make sure to write complete sentence for outline. Also, aim of the study. They could ask you for any study. Make sure you know the aims for each. I have nothing much to say about an aim. Just make sure you phrase it correctly. To investigate so and so. Just write it that way. Now, if we think about Pozzulo et al., they wanted to investigate accuracy in eyewitness testimony, in the sense they wanted to show that children tend to make a lot of false positives on target absent lineups. Make sure you use terminology like firstly target absent lineup, false positives, social pressure when you're writing. For descriptive type of questions which are very direct like aim, results, conclusion, sample, terminology needs to be good to get full marks. If you write something vague, like in your false positive, students would write something like understanding the target from the photographs. It's not clear what they are trying to say. Like, are they understanding the concept or not is not clear. Secondly, it does not convey the right meaning of what's a false positive. So just make sure you know the term and you write that for most clarity. The aim was to investigate how social pressure can result in children making false positives during identification from target absent lineups while giving eyewitness testimony. No doubt your wording can be different provided like which textbook you're learning from, but make sure essential terminology is there. Anytime if you're confused about what is the essential terminology for any study, just refer to the syllabus copy, the official 9990 syllabus which is there. It always lists out all important terms from every study. Make sure you know those. In fact, a good revision strategy can be to keep that syllabus in front of you before the papers and use it like a checklist, making sure you're able to use all the terms and to define them. In your mind, you know what is their meaning. Next is explain why the studies from the cognitive approach. This question is extremely common. They ask for some approach and they expect you to link it to the assumptions. Always when I'm teaching, I make sure to tell my students to learn all the assumptions for all the approaches. In every approach, there's two assumptions, and there are four approaches in total. So 4 into 2, 8 assumptions you should know by heart. Of course, you can learn and write. You don't need to memorize, but students miss out on terminology when they write in their own words. That's why I just say memorize. So for these type of questions, it's a very straightforward way of answering. Just name the assumption that you've learned, any one, and then just link it to the study. So write something from the study that matches the assumption. Again, ideally, you should have practiced this type of question for all the studies before you come to the paper. One thing is when we practice these type of questions, many students will ask, should I give a specific finding? Like, do I need to say, for example, children showed 99% accuracy in the target present lineup task? No, if they want that, they explicitly mention it. They will say, give one finding of the Pozzolo et al. Study and connect it with the assumptions of the cognitive approach. If they haven't mentioned the word finding, they don't want you to give numerical results. In fact, avoid giving that, it becomes unnecessary. Save your time, you're not going to get credit for that. One of the assumptions of the cognitive approach is that humans process information just like computers, input, process, output. So that is one assumption that can be easily linked to this study. So my style of writing would be, yours could be a little different. You could give the assumption later. But my style would be to first state the assumption and then link it to the study. So one assumption of the cognitive approach is that humans process information like computers using input, process, output. Pozzolo et al. Shows that in identification tasks, target identification tasks, information about a culprit's appearance can be the input, their perception can be the process, and identification on a lineup can be the output. Okay, again, your answer could be a little different. That's fine. I just want you to learn how, like I'm telling you from the beginning. So, for this type of answer, your how is going to be, have you written the assumption clearly first and correctly? Just check that. And the next sentence which you're giving from the study, is it attuned with the assumption? What some students will do, the assumption they'll write correctly, but then what they give from the study, that is totally irrelevant to the assumption. For example, they'll say children perform better than adults, so adults perform better than children. How is it meeting the assumption? What is the connection between what sentence you wrote first, what you wrote second? If children did better than adults, say on target present cartoon condition, how does that show any type of input process output? You have to be very explicit about it. So, like I have written, make sure. You might take the second assumption also of the cognitive approach. The second assumption is that there are individual differences in cognitive tasks, that is, people's attention, memory, etc., can be different. Their performance on such tasks can be different because their way of processing information is different, something to that effect. If you're taking that, then definitely you can give that outcome that children, for example, perform better than adults in identifying cartoon faces when it came to target present condition. But again, it has to be explicitly linked. If you're just going to write that, it's not going to be credit worthy. You have to write because children and adults process information differently. Children's perception of cartoons is better than that of adults because of exposure. Something like that. Because of exposure, they process it better. Some explanation has to be, how is the second sentence justifying what you've written in the first? It cannot be just like that. Like, two things cannot be unconnected in your answer. Okay, let's look at the next one. These type of questions are very straightforward. In the study by Milgram, there was a learning task. Milgram called it the paired associate learning task. Describe the learning task. These type of questions, you have to write complete sentences. In fact, you have to write a complete paragraph. So what you have to do, most important thing, look at the marks that have been assigned for the questions. 5 marks means you'll have to give at least 5 unique points to justify 5 marks. If you give anything less than 5 points, it does not justify the marks, and if you give anything more, it's unnecessarily time consuming. One sentence does not equate 1 point. 1 point means some unique feature or aspect you're giving about the task. So you might write 4, 5 points in one sentence, then also you have met the requirement of the question. Or you might take 10 sentences to bring about 5 different features, then also you have answered the question. The number of sentences is immaterial. How many points you're writing is very important. You have to write 5 points for 5 marks. The same question could be asked for 4 marks, in which case you would have to write 4 points. One more very common mistake in these type of questions is to write something that exceeds what has been asked. They've asked you for the learning task. They haven't asked you how the lottery was rigged. They haven't asked you how the sample shock was given to the participant. They haven't asked you how the prods were given by the experimenters. Strictly learning task. So every point that you write must have something to do with the learning task. It shouldn't be something that came before the learning task or after that. That will automatically be marked as wrong. So what can be 5 points that we can give for the learning task? Here we should have just studied the procedure well. That is the way of answering. Make sure you write in chronological order. Make sure you write in correct sequence when you're answering so that it makes sense. No doubt, even if you write it scattered, some point from later in the procedure you give first in the procedure you give later, you still get marks because they're in mark scheme, they're just concerned about the point should be there. But think from an examiner's perspective, if you want them to not miss out on anything you're writing, you'll have to give them a logical flow of ideas that's easier to follow. So make sure you write in correct order so that the examiner can read easily and they by mistake also don't miss out on some point that you've given. So it's for your scoring that you need to write logically. When you learn also, if you learn in sequence, you understand better. So there's no point of learning points here and there. To be able to learn well and write well, always learn things in correct order. How the learning paired associate task takes place is the teacher, that is the genuine participant, or you can call them the naive participant, had to teach or read out to the learner a list of paired associates. Then the teacher tested the learner on the list. The teacher would read out one pair word from the list. The learner would have to supply the correct associate word that they had learned from a choice of four alternatives to get the answer correct. Okay, so I'll just make it explicit, like I'll point out to you which are the 5 points here for which I will get 5 marks. As such, I've put them in bold, but still, just to make it more prominent, reading out to the list to the learner means teaching the learner the list. That becomes 1 mark, because in the first point I'm indicating that first the teacher taught the learner the list. Second is about testing. So I've mentioned the testing phase, that will get me 1 mark. What is happening in the testing phase? The teacher is reading out one word. The third mark for that, because I'm indicating what the teacher is doing. Fourth mark for what the learner has to do in response, give the correct word. Fifth mark for specifying how many options the learner has to choose from. When I read my answer, is it everything that I've written has something to do with the learning task? Yes. Am I talking about something beyond the learning task? For example, the prods or the rigged lottery? No, nothing has to do with anything beyond the learning task. So first of all, I'm well within the frame of what the question is asking for. If I write anything outside the frame, it's not going to get credit. So that's the first thing I need to be sure of. Secondly, like I told you, one sentence is not 1 point. If you see, I've written in four sentences for 5 points, because two of my points are in the same sentence, and that's perfectly correct. The examiner does not care about how many sentences you write. The examiner does not care about how long the answer is, how short it is, what is the word count. There is no mark scheme where you will find that you're getting credit for word count or for number of sentences. They are only concerned about you covering the points. So a short, brief answer like mine, which is covering all the points, is fine. There are other possibilities of what you can write. There are other things which are connected with the learning task. So it's not like only these 5 points are available. You could also talk about the way of asking, the materials which were used for asking. The teacher had a mic on which he would read out the word. The learner was in the other room on the intercom. He would hear the question. He had to press a button in front of him. The teacher had a screen in front of them and a quadrant would light up. Those points are also very relevant to the learning task. Definitely, any of those could be your points. Or you could also talk about the punishment. That's also fine. That is also within, it's a part of the learning task. If the learner gave the right answer, the teacher moved to the next word. If the learner did not give the right answer, the teacher gave a shock which increased by 15 volts with every wrong answer. Definitely. Those, anything that is relevant to learning task, you can write. But the key is not to give unnecessary points. If I know 10 points, I can write 10. I'm not going to get credit for it. Better to save my time for the coming questions, the 8 and 10 marker, which are going to be much more time consuming. So you should know what to write and you should know where to stop also. So I hope that is clear with this answer. One last thing about this type of question is, many students will ask me, but at that time when they are writing in the paper, We don't have time to check whether we are within the frame or not, whether we've exceeded the points. That is something you're not supposed to leave also for the exam. Like, what is preparation for? Why are you going to the exam hall unprepared? That will be your mistake. So that's why you have to practice past papers, so that you initially, when you're practicing the past papers, you make those type of mistakes, you rectify yourself. By the time the paper comes, you are automatically able to write the right answers. At the time of the paper, you're not supposed to think about, I'm in the frame or not, or I'm giving the justified number of points or not. This all you have to do during practice. So exams are not something you go for without any practice and without any learning. So that argument does not make sense. Make sure you're practicing enough so that these things become automatic before the paper. Okay, very straightforward question. In fact, in this paper, we can see assumptions have been given lot of importance, because one of those questions was about linking an assumption of the cognitive approach to Pozzolo study. And then this question is about state of two assumptions of biological approach. That's why I say it's very important to memorize the assumptions, because you can see 4 marks. You can gain so easily if you just know the assumptions. Here you don't even need to connect it to any study. Okay, this is a very straightforward question. You just have to state the two assumptions. These type of questions are where you can save time actually. If you've learned well, you'll be able to write very fast. And that time you can utilize well for your 8 and 10 marks. Okay. One assumption is that cognitions, emotions, and behaviors are because of biological factors such as brain functioning, neurotransmitters, hormones, evolution, etc. I don't see how anyone can make a mistake on this question. Perhaps not to confuse it with any other approach, but I don't think you do that. Okay, another assumption is similarities and differences in the behaviors of individuals can be attributed to the differential working of biological factors in their body. Okay, something to this effect. Okay, let's look at the next question. Explain how one finding from Holzel et al. Supports one of the assumptions you outlined in A. This is that type of question which I was talking about earlier, where I mentioned students will ask that do you need to give findings. You can see how explicitly they ask you if they want you to connect findings with the study, or with the assumption. This paper is a little unusual because normally asking the same type of questions like assumptions twice is not the case. Anyways, good chance to score marks, but don't expect this to be repeated. I don't think again they will do such a paper in which two questions are about assumptions. As far as Holzel et al. Is concerned, when it comes to findings, it's not about the numbers. In that study, numbers are not very important. The brain areas are very important. It's not a hardcore requirement that you specify the brain areas which you increase, but to be safe, I would say that you do mention. See, anyways, when you're learning the study, for the results, you will memorize which brain area showed an increase in the MBSR group versus the ordinary control group. So why not mention it here? As such, even if you just say increase in gray matter without specifying areas, you can score for this one. But this is how I would like to write the answer, so I'll just show you. My style is the same, to state the assumption, then give the result, but assumptions are already there in part A. So I need not repeat them. I'll just name the assumption. Like I'll just indicate it because I've already written it. For assumption 2, let me take assumption 2. The result that only the MBSR group showed gray matter concentration increase in areas like the left hippocampus, cerebellum, posterior cingulate cortex, and temporoparietal junction is attributed to the practice of mindfulness. That is, since the MBSR group uh, enhance the plasticity of their brain, actually not enhanced but made use of plasticity of their brain by practicing mindfulness, and the control group did not, these differences were observed. Okay, so here what we are saying is the second assumption is saying similarities and differences are because of biological factors. So as far as the MBSR group was concerned, they made use of the plasticity in their brain, which is a biological factor, to change the structures of their brain, to show growth in them. Whereas the other group did not make use of plasticity of their brain because they didn't get the opportunity to do mindfulness. So, how I have explicitly linked to the assumptions is by saying that this is the assumption because it's about individual differences and similarities. Explicitly, I've mentioned that these are the two groups, these are the differences which they are showing, and it's because of this biological factor, making use of the plasticity or not. So, it's just that it's not a difficult answer to write. It's just that you have to be able to link it very clearly to the assumption given. Also, like I said, findings in Holzel et al. Mainly about naming the brain parts because it's not so much about any numbers. Because they've asked for finding, directly I've named the brain areas to justify finding part of the question. Okay, if we were to take the first assumption instead, that is differences in behaviors as such, not differences, but behaviors are because of biological factors, definitely you can justify that also. You could say in this study, whatever gains were then mindfulness on the FFMQ, they gained in terms of becoming more observant, less judgmental, and all that all also can be attributed to the plasticity of the brain. The fact that it can grow in response to mindfulness practice that results in the individual gaining these benefits, like being non judgmental and so forth. So that goes to show that cognition, emotions, behaviors, in this case, cognition, change in the way of thinking, is because of biological factors like the plasticity of the brain. So, definitely, any of the assumptions you could justify in the second part, just make sure it's clear how that particular assumption is being met. There are more questions in the paper, of course, but I cannot cover them in this part. Today, I have only this much time. So, I'll try to upload the next video soon, in which I will cover the question 6 onwards, and in that, I will try to cover the entire paper. If you have any doubts or questions about this video, if you have any suggestion on what I should do next, please leave it in the comments box below. If you want private tuition for your Cambridge A-level psychology, only then you can use the email ID or WhatsApp number given below. Otherwise, please leave any other questions or doubts that you have in the comments box below. I do read your comments and I answer them whenever I get the time. Okay, so thank you for watching this video and we'll meet again soon. Goodbye.